Alright, today I'm going to talk about my Milwaukee M18 grease gun. So, I got this grease gun in order to make my life a little bit easier while greasing my equipment. So, I considered getting the 12 volt version, but since I already had some M18 batteries, I decided to spend a little bit more and get the 18 volt version. So, some features that this one has are, it has a light up here in case you needed that, so the little power for the lights there. It has a lock switch, so right now it's in the lock mode, so the trigger won't go anywhere. Then it has an unlock mode right here, and you can squeeze the trigger. And then it has a trigger lock mode where you squeeze the trigger and you push this in and it holds it down. So that trigger hold down feature is kind of nice if you're, like, for instance, if you were doing a heavy greasing. So for instance, when I grease the hubs of the axles on my trailers, I can just click it and leave it running, and then at the same time what I'll do is I'll spin the wheel on the trailer, and that way it kind of gets the grease into the bearings a little bit easier. And so for instance that, or if I'm greasing my mowers, I have some zero turns, and so the zero turns, you just click it on and you just let it go until the grease starts coming out, because it takes a lot of grease to grease the spindles on the mowers properly. So this grease gun has a long cable, which is good, but I'll show you that in a minute. But as far as control goes, you can leave it in this on position, which when you click the trigger it will just keep going and going and going, or it has I guess like a pump count setting on here. So for instance, if I squeeze the trigger with it set to 1, it'll just pump out 1 unit, or however they consider it. It'll just pump once, and then you can set it to 2 and you just pump it twice, and vice versa. It goes all the way up in single increments from 10, and then after that goes up in increments of 5, so 15, 20, 25, 50. So like I said, I'm not sure what you would need 50 pumps of grease for. Seems like a lot, but who knows, maybe you're greasing something that's huge or whatnot. I'm totally not sure, but I mean, I'm sure I get close to that when I'm doing some heavy greasing, but you might as well just leave it to the on position. But if you were doing something specific, like say you were doing regular maintenance on a tractor, skid steer, whatever, and you knew that you wanted to put 3 pumps of grease in each fitting, so you would just walk around, you'd squeeze the trigger, and it just kind of makes it a little less that you have to think about. So you just walk around, attach the grease fitting, click the trigger, and it'll stop on its own. So it pump, 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 and then it cuts off. But I usually just use it in the on position, so that works out for me. And like I was saying about the settings for the pressure, you have setting 2, which pumps more grease, so it pumps a higher volume of grease, but with less PSI as far as the actual pressure that it takes to pump into the fitting. And then you can pump it, put it in setting 1, which is a high PSI rating, and it's a lower flow on the amount of grease that comes out. And so if you had a fitting that happened to be, I don't know, stuck or jammed or something like that, you can set it to 1, and basically the way the grease comes out of the end of the tube, it comes out in a higher PSI form, allowing you to kind of push through the fitting and clear it out. So the model number for this is 2646-20, and you have the holder for the grease gun end over here, so you just slide the end in here, and then it has a little tension clip there, and you know, that works out great for storing the cable because this is relatively long, which is good. So this is probably somewhere around 3 feet long, so that works out well for where you can just set this down somewhere and you could, you know, reach multiple fittings in some instances, or if you need to set it down and grease something that you're greasing a lot, you know, you don't have to hold this at the same time, so you can set it down somewhere versus like having one of those pistol grip pumps and you pump it and it just has a little 4-inch or 6-inch nozzle on there. You have to hold that while you're doing everything else, depending on what you're doing. So, you know, I have noticed a few things that I didn't really, you know, kind of found out on my own while I've been using this grease gun. So the grease goes in this tube and you unscrew the tube and it slides out from in here, and then you can reload your tube of grease. But if you want to know how much grease you have, you can just pull out on this and it will tell you it has, let's see if I can catch that in the light. They're kind of, yeah, so you can kind of see that. Yeah, so you see how it says 4 out of 4, and then it's notched 3/4, halfway, quarter full. So right now I have pretty much a full tube of grease in here, but when you start using it, you know, it doesn't pull this in. You can leave this in, and as you go, once the grease gets low, if you pull this out, it'll stop and let you know. So if you have half of a tube left, or if you have a quarter of a tube left, you know, it'll let you know. It won't pull out any further, and that kind of lets you know that that's how much grease you have left. So, all right, so in a minute I'm going to show you me greasing my mower spindles, and as you just saw, this measurement reader was reading 4 out of 4, so I just properly greased the spindles, and that's as far as it will come out. So I used probably a little over a quarter of a tube of grease. So as far as it will come out now, if I can get it to focus, this 2 out of 4 is right there, so half, and then so a little over, I have a little over half a tube left, so that's as far as it will come out. So that's how the measurement feature works on the Milwaukee grease. I don't know if I noticed that on anyone's video when I was looking to purchase this, but you know, that it's been a while, so I could be wrong. And also, this grease gun, when you first use it and you're putting in a fresh tube of grease, basically when they tell you to prime it, so basically you give it a few pumps and then you push in this button here, and then it will release pressure through this side vent here, and obviously when the air stops coming out, some grease is going to start coming out, and that kind of primes it. That way you don't have air in the motor and you can actually burn up the motor. So, you know, it doesn't usually happen a lot. You know, even when you run out of a tube of grease, it doesn't usually make a difference. You don't usually have to prime it again, but depends on how much, you know, if you like really suck it dry, then, you know, you might need to prime it again. So it's just a good thing to maybe check it every once in a while to make sure that you are in fact you have purged all the air out. So this grease gun does have a little hanger here. I guess you could put a, I don't know, a carabiner or some kind of hook on here if you wanted to hook it somewhere. So you have that option up there. And then you also have some sort of hook station up here where you could in theory hook it somewhere for here too. So originally when you get the grease gun, you're going to get a normal, let's see, I'm trying to find it right now. You'll get a normal, this is the grease chuck or whatever they call it that normally comes with it. So this is just a standard one where you press it down onto the fitting, and you kind of have to give it some force and make sure it locks on, and then if it kind of wiggles to the side or side, you can kind of lose some grease that way. So I've never been a huge fan of these, so I did some research, and the really popular one now is this Lock N Lube here. So basically you just squeeze this trigger here, you lock this down on your fitting, and then it doesn't go anywhere. So this is again called Lock N Lube, and it's extremely handy. The only real handicap for this is its ability to get into really tight spaces. So I mean, it's somewhat of an issue, but at the same time, grease guns normally have a fitting that comes from here to here, so you're adding on an extra inch or two here that would kind of hinder you because the tube already has this little flex piece here. So it's only so much of a tight space you can get into with one of these, regardless of whether you have the Lock N Lube or not. But everything I use it for, I'm able to figure out a way to get this Lock N Lube onto my grease fittings, and it just makes everything super easy. So once you lock it on, you don't have to worry about holding it. I found in the past where I'm greasing, you have to make sure you keep one hand on the hose, because if you set it on the fitting and then you let go, it kind of, the cable, the hose puts tension on the fitting, and then it kind of pulls it to the side and grease will start slipping out. So this doesn't do that, it locks it on there tight, and so I definitely love that. So right now I'm going to get you set up, and we're going to grease up the spindles on my mower, and we will see the grease gun in action. Alright, so we're over here at the mower, and I'm going to grease up the spindles. So like I was saying, I just take the Lock N Lube fitting and I'm going to attach it to this. I would recommend, this is not a how-to on greasing, but I would recommend cleaning all the dirt off of this fitting. That way you don't push dirt into your spindle, and it kind of over time can add to some extra corrosion. So just take the Lock N Lube, set it down on there, and then it's locked on, and I'm tugging on it, it's not going anywhere. So you have the grease gun here, and I have a 5 amp hour battery on it, and when you're ready to grease, you just squeeze the trigger. So then we just unhook this, and we bring it over to this fitting, lock it on, and again, the grease gun sitting here. Alright, so I got it down there on that fitting, and this one, the spindles hold a lot of grease, but this one down here doesn't hold that much, so it's just going to get a few pumps. So that's all that one's going to get, and then I'll show you my limitations with the Lock N Lube over here, how sometimes it doesn't go in as easy as I would like it to. Alright, so over here it's kind of a tight fit with this lift assembly over here, so inserting the Lock N Lube is a little more difficult. Now I've lowered the deck here to make it easier, but if I don't lower the deck, I basically can just stick the hose fitting down through this piece here, and then I can get it from there. But I've lowered the deck, but you can see kind of how it has to bend in order to get to the fittings, and so you can see you need some space if you were going to try and grease in tight areas. But mowers do take quite a bit of grease, so you know, it's one of those things, and constantly having to hold a pump and pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping, it's much nicer to just be able to squeeze the trigger and you're good to go. Especially, you know, like my tractor has like 10 fittings on there, and they don't all take a lot of grease, but you know, you spend most of your time getting to the fitting. If you clean off the fitting, which I would recommend, I wipe off the fittings, and then you have to attach the grease gun. And if you didn't have the Lock N Lube on the end, if you didn't have the Lock N Lube there on the end, you'd have to take your one hand and hold it to the fitting, and then you're obviously going to be holding this grease gun in your other hand, and this one you can just squeeze the trigger and it comes out, or you can grab the pistol grip ones and you can pump, or if you have the long handled ones, it takes two hands to use the handle, so you have to hold the grease and then you have to hold the handle, and you pump both of them together, and boom, that's you know, the extent of your greasing. So anything to make it a little bit easier if you're doing frequent greasing, and it is definitely worth investing in some sort of grease gun. So I know Milwaukee has one, DeWalt has one. They both work with your platforms. So I think DeWalt's only 18 volt, whereas Milwaukee has an 18 volt one and a 12 volt one. So something to consider. And yeah, I can't recommend it enough. If you have any questions, let me know. I will have a link to this in the description below. I get all my Milwaukee stuff from Home Depot. They just have good prices and good deals, and free shipping. So I just order what I need, because most of the time Home Depot doesn't have a lot of the specialty stuff in the store, because they're a hardware store, so they sell a lot of drills, a lot of circular saws, but they do have a specialty section for some other stuff. Like they probably have a grease gun of some sort, whether it be 18 volt or 12 volt. Just depends on your Home Depot, but I know my Home Depot has limited selections on stuff, so ordering it's totally fine for me. And yeah, thanks for watching, and again, let me know if you have any questions.